Welcome everybody, I'm Georgino and this is CCN's Money and Markets. We're going to be talking about our nation's money today, or lack thereof. Dr. Walter Williams, distinguished economics professor at George Mason University, describes our national debt situation as an issue of morality, saying we've become an immoral people, demanding that Congress forcibly use one American to serve the purpose of another. Williams, among other economists, point out that a significant portion of our federal government spending is merely a redistribution of wealth to programs like farm subsidies, business and bank bailouts, welfare, social security, food stamps, and the list goes on. And these redistributions of wealth are supposed to be funded by taxes, of course. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, there has never and will never be enough tax dollars to sustain these programs. This is further evidenced by the fact that September 8th, 2017 marked the day that the United States officially eclipsed the $20 trillion national debt milestone. The debt was already $10.6 trillion when former President Barack Obama took office. By the end of 2012, the debt grew to over $15 trillion. By the end of his presidency, our debt ballooned to nearly $20 trillion. That's almost double what it was when Barack Obama took office. In 2014, the Congressional Budget Office noted that between 2009 and 2012, the federal government took on the largest deficits as a percentage of GDP since World War II. However, as the Obama administration likes to boast, they managed to decrease the deficit. But when you reduce the deficit, does that mean you reduce the debt? Of course it doesn't. After all, as then President Obama was reducing the deficit, his administration was still significantly increasing the national debt. The explanation is simple. While savings achieved by reducing the deficit or achieving a surplus can be used to apply your payments to debt, ours haven't been. Instead, we've retained past savings in order to expand entitlement programs in subsequent years, which are already doomed to insolvency. As such, the debt continues to climb. Take California as a microcosm at the state level. Despite the impressive metrics of a booming California economy, half of every dollar used to pay off California's debt is used to pay interest alone because of how much this interest has accumulated. Now, before 1998, the national debt held by the public was on average about 39% of GDP. By the end of 2017, it climbed to over 75% of GDP. And just how much debt can America handle? Well, in 2013, a paper written by economists at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business asserted that our tipping point could come when public debt reaches 80 to 90% of GDP. This is alarming because the Congressional Budget Office projects that by 2034, the 90% mark will be surpassed and we will have reached our tipping point. I want you to imagine a trip to the doctor's office in which the doctor tells you you have a drinking problem. And then you reply to the doctor, you said, "Doctor, I don't have a problem drinking at all." That's the situation the United States is in when it comes to its debt. And the worst is yet to come. The Federal Reserve recently raised interest rates and intends to raise them again under new Chairman Jerome Powell. What does this mean? This means that the government's debt service costs will soon increase. The Treasury will have to incur highest interest expenses due to higher rates on bonds, and the deficit, along with the debt, will grow even faster. However, it's crucially important to note that unsustainable entitlement spending and crushing debt didn't begin in the Obama administration. In fact, right behind the Obama administration on the leaderboard in terms of debt growth is the Bush administration. And the underlying theory behind the now permanent fixtures of entitlement spending and debt financing can be tied as far back as FDR's presidency and his New Deal. Although appearing to be fairly effective at the time, this economic progressive ideology has led us down a path on which millions of Americans are now dependent on insolvent and near bankrupt trust funds. If you tuned into our third episode, you were shown the bleak state of Social Security and how future generations will likely not benefit from the program as it is on track to go bankrupt by 2034. This is where the real issue of morality kicks in, rising generations. Redistributing wealth through higher taxation paired with reckless borrowing in order to fund unsustainable safety net programs will all prove to be at the cost of younger generations, who will bear the burden of higher debt at the hands of our progressive tax code. Yes, in light of recent tax reform, it is still a very progressive rate structure. Now, when does it stop? There isn't even enough annual revenue in the entire private sector to cover our current debt. Our GDP is $18.5 trillion, and our debt is over $20 trillion. You couldn't pay off the debt in 1 year if you robbed every single American of every single dollar they earn or produce. The United States is the largest economy on earth, and even so, it's not large enough to stomach the debt burden which has been placed on the shoulders of rising generations. The fact remains that the 1% is not large enough to pay for all of the aforementioned socialism. And the situation laid out before you is even worse than we know about. The Government Accountability Office, or GAO, effectively serves as the auditor for the federal government. The GAO tells us something very troubling. In recent reports, they tell us that there are significant and material weaknesses in the accounting performed at all levels of the federal government. Now, to draw on my experience in public accounting to explain this, what it means is that the GAO is saying that significant and material weaknesses in the accounting practices of the government are ongoing. And what this means is that financial statements will be potentially inaccurate. And not just inaccurate, but pervasively inaccurate throughout all of our government's branches, departments, and all of our government's financial statements. Our federal government not only operates at a massive loss every year, but it can't even keep track of what it is losing. So truly, the people are left in the dark. Something has to be done soon. But if you look at the Trump administration's recent budget proposal, it appears that we still have no confident course of action as far as the debt goes. In light of President Trump's $1.5 trillion infrastructure spending plan, the omnibus spending bill, and other propositions and topics like paid maternity leave, it seems like massive deficit spending will remain the norm. Now, Americans should wonder, how are we going to pay for a $1.5 trillion infrastructure spending plan? I have an answer for you. You don't pay for it. You borrow for it, just like the prior two administrations did. In 2015, Boston University economics professor Lawrence Kotlikoff testified before the Senate Budget Committee about the national debt. He said the following, and I quote, "Our country is broke. It's not broke in 75 years, or 50 years, or 25 years, or 10 years. It's broke today." Just some food for thought until you join us next time on CCN's Money and Markets. Thank you.